When I was a child, there was a legend in the village that an elderly person over 100 years old would become a man-eating evil spirit. On the day my brother was 100 years old, my yard was full of people. My grandfather cooked 10 eggs, and he put them in front of my mistress and whispered, "Mom, as long as you can peel one of these 10 eggs, you can stay at home." I heard from the villagers that evil ghosts cannot see eggs, only people can see them. My melter frowned, and she said aggrievedly, "Coo easy, my mother's hands are shaking. It's hard to hold chopsticks. Why do you still ask my mother to peel the eggs? My breasts are not in good health." She was injured when she was young and often trembled. My grandfather said, "Mom, everyone in the village is watching. If you can't peel the eggs, you can't stay at home." My mistress said pitifully, "Your father died early. I raised 4 of your brothers by myself." My hands trembled. "How can I peel the eggs?" When my breasts said this, her hands began to tremble. My grandfather frowned and didn't say anything for a long time. Seeing that my grandfather didn't say anything, my mother said, "Mom, I'll say something bad. 5 years ago, old Zhao's wife refused to peel eggs. His son insisted on leaving old Zhao's wife at home, but 7 died in the family. Almost lost. As soon as my breasts finished speaking, my breasts changed their faces. Her eyes looked fierce when she looked at my breasts, as if she was about to get angry. Seeing that my mistress didn't say anything, MYM said again, "Mom, if you refuse to peel eggs, you will have become an evil ghost, right?" As soon as my breasts finished speaking, everyone in the village was stunned and stared at my breasts. My breasted squinted her eyes, and she muttered in a low voice, "I peel, I peel." My mist's hands were still shaking, and they were shaking very hard. She tried several times, but couldn't hold the egg firmly. In the end, my grandfather stuffed the egg into my mist's hands. My toothy breasts were holding the egg, and my eyes turned back and forth twice. Suddenly, the light in the room went out, and everyone was stunned. When the light was turned on, my toothy breasts had already peeled the egg. My grandfather was relieved to see my grandmother peeling the eggs, and my grandfather said to the villagers, "It's all gone." The villagers left one after another, and only the family members were left in the yard. My grandfather said, "Mom peeled off the eggs, we have to give my mother a 100th birthday." My third master smiled and said, "Mom, you are blessed to be a 100th birthday." My breasted grinned, staring at the people in the room. She glanced around and said with a smile, "Blessed, I am blessed than your father." My grandfather said, "Slay pigs and sheep, and I will do it for 3 days. You little kids are here to accompany your mistress in the house." After my grandfather said this, he went to the yard to catch pigs, and only a few of us children and too much milk were left in the house. My maid stared at us with a smile. She waved to the smallest Yuanbao. Yuanbao ran to the side of the maid. My maid held Yuanbao in her arms and smelled it. My breast asked, "How old is Yuanbao?" Yuanbao said, "Age 4. My breasts even reached out to touch Yuanbao's face. She smiled and said, "Yuanbao is so fragrant." When my toothy breast said this, I saw her teeth getting sharper and longer. My breasts seemed to notice that I was looking at her. She turned her head to look at me and waved to me. She smiled and said, "Yuan Fu, come here too." I have 2 thin breasts and her face is also very poor. I always feel that her body is shining with yellow light and lifeless. I don't know why, but I'm a little afraid of my too much breasts. Seeing that I was still moving, my breasts were so unhappy that I could see the naked eye. She said, "Yuan Fu, come here." I tiptoed to my breasts, who pulled me into my arms with great force. She also pinched the flesh on my back. She said, "Yuanfu is fatter than Yuanbao." My grandma laughed out loud after saying this. My grandma let go of Yuanbao and me, and waved to Shouying and Xiui again. They were older, but they were only 7 or 8 years old. My grandma said, "Shouying, Xiui, come here, grandma hug you." Xiuiying approached my breasts. My breasts touched Xiuiying's face and said dissatisfiedly, "It's too thin, it's all bones." My grandma looked at Xiaoyi again and she said, "Come here." Xiaoyi stood there without moving, and she said, "I won't go, you are a man-eating evil spirit." As soon as Xiaoyi finished speaking, my two mistress changed her face. She said with a gloomy face, "Stupid girl, what did you say? Believe it or not, I'll slap you in the face." Xiaoyi said, "I saw it just now. The egg was not peeled by you, but my grandfather. He stuffed the peeled egg into your hand." My two-breasted face said, "No, nonsense. I won't beat you to death." Xiaoyi said, "I'm not talking nonsense." My two-breasted eyes turned back and forth twice, and she took out 2 candy balls from her pocket, and all of us kids widened their eyes. The sugar balls are very sweet and can only be eaten during the Chinese New Year. My two mist squinted her eyes, and she said, "Xiaoyi, come here, I'll give you a candy ball." Xiaoyi was stunned for a few seconds, and she stared at the candy ball. My grandma said softly, "Come here, come here." My breasts were smiling and my tone of speaking was soft. Xiaoyi approached my grandma, and my grandma stuffed the candy balls into Xiaoyi's mouth. My two melted milk asked, "Is it sweet?" Xiaoyi nodded, "Sweet." My grandma smiled on her face, and she said, "Xiaoyi, you read it wrong just now. The eggs were peeled off by the grandma. If the grandma is really an evil spirit who eats people, can you still give you sugar balls?" Xiaoyi hesitated for a few seconds and didn't say anything. Only Xiaoyi could eat candy balls, and we could only watch. My two miss said, "Stop watching, I will just have 2 candy balls, go out to play." My grandma drove us out, but she took Xiaoyi's hand and asked Xiaoyi to stay. A few of us kids went to the yard to play. Xiaoyi was unhappy and said, "The grandma keeps Xiaoyi, and she must secretly give Xiaoyi something delicious." I nodded, "It must be. There are many children at home, but they eat less, and some can eat some but they can't. We have long been used to it." At night, there were 3 tables in my yard and everyone in my family served the table to have a meal. Only Aunt San didn't go to the table. She shouted loudly, "Xiaoyi." No one responded. Aunt San is Xiaoyi's mother. She asked a few of us children, "Did you see Xiaoyi?" Xiaoyi said, "Sui's just went to the official account who carrot bus to see more before she was in the Westinghouse." As soon as Xiaoyi finished speaking, Aunt San looked at my grandma and said, "My grandma, Xiaoyi." My grandma said, "I don't know, go to the cottage to take a look." She said she went to the cottage just now. Aunt San hurried to the cottage, looked inside carefully, and said, "No." My toothy frowned and she said, "Then I don't know." Aunt San was stunned for a few seconds and almost fell to the ground. She shouted loudly, "Xiaoyi." Still no one responded. My grandfather said, "Everyone will help find it." I searched all the inside and outside of my yard, but I just couldn't see Xiaoyi. Aunt San was so anxious that she stomped her feet, and tears rolled in her eyes. "Where is Xiaoyi?" My grandfather said, "Mom, you can bring a few dolls to have dinner first, let's go find Xiaoyi first." After my grandfather said this, he walked out of the yard and shouted, "Xiaoyi." Everyone in the yard also went to find Xiaoyi, leaving only a few of us at home. There was pork and fish on the table, which was very rich. A few of us kids sat on the stool and ate in big mouthfuls. My breasts seemed to have no appetite. She sat on the stool and didn't eat any food. I said, "To milk, why don't you eat it?" My two miss laughed out loud, and she said, "I'm not hungry yet, you can eat more." After my two girls said this, she entered the warehouse. There was a smell of blood in the warehouse, and a pot of pig-killing blood was in the warehouse. My toothy breasts entered the warehouse for a long time before they came out. When she came out, I saw blood on the corner of her clothes, and the blood was not very obvious. My tooth breast smiled, and she said, "Just eat enough, go into the house to go to bed early." After my two girls said this, she entered the house. A few of us kids were voracious and soon filled. A few of us kids entered the house. My grandma had already laid the bedding. When I saw us entering the house, my grandma smiled and said, "Go to bed with a dirt can." A few of us kids got on the earthen can, and my two missed she turned off the lights. I closed my eyes and went to sleep. Late at night, I heard the crack sound. Someone was eating. But so late, who can eat? I opened my eyes and saw Yuanbao and Xiaoying sleeping. Only my toothed breasts were facing away from me, and the sound came from her. I said, "Great lady, what are you eating?" My two-breasted back froze obviously, and she turned her back to me and said, "I'm hungry and eating carrots." I said, "To milk, you have bad teeth. Why do you still eat carrots?" As soon as I finished speaking, my two-breasted turned to look at me. Her eyes looked at me very strange and gloomy. It seemed as if I asked another question and she would strangle me to death. My grandma said, "Go to bed quickly." I had to close my eyes and continue to sleep, but I could still hear the crack sound. The sound lasted for a long time and disappeared just before dawn. The next morning, all the family came back. They searched for Xiaoyi for a night but couldn't find Xiaoyi. Aunt San collapsed on the ground and cried loudly. Everyone in the family advised Aunt San to relax. Aunt San cried and said, "Xiaoyi never runs around and is very obedient. Why did she disappear after coming out of the west room?" When Aunt San said this, her eyes stared at my toothed breasts. My two-melter frowned and she said, "My wife, what do you mean by saying this?" Aunt San cried and said, "I just asked Xiaoying, and Xiaoying said you and Xiaoyi were quarreling in the house. Xiaoyi said you were a man-eating evil spirit, and said that the egg was peeled by the uncle for you, and then you just give Xiaoyi candy and leave Xiaoyi alone in the house. Xiaoyi is what you killed. The uncle in Aunt Third is my grandfather." My grandfather was stunned for a few seconds, and he said, "My wife, don't talk nonsense. I didn't peel the egg." Aunt San sneered a few times, and she said, "When the milk wants to peel the eggs, the light goes out. When the light is on, the milk peels the eggs. This is strange. I just want to know where my Xiaoyi is." My two-breasted narrowed her eyes, and she said, "You can't believe what the child says, you can lie," and I peeled the eggs. As soon as my two-mist finished speaking, Aunt San took an egg out of the warehouse and said, "My mother, peel the egg open. As long as you peel the egg, I believe you are not an evil ghost." As soon as my third aunt finished speaking, my third master rushed up. He kicked my third aunt down and cursed loudly, "What are you? Shanzi is not at home, but you dare to be the domineering king. Get back, go home." My third master is my third aunt's father-in-law. My third uncle works in the city and hasn't come back for a long time. Moreover, my third master looks very similar to my master. If you don't look carefully, you can't tell at all. My third aunt cried and said, "Xiaoyi is gone, I don't want to live anymore. If you don't peel the egg in front of me today, I will recognize you as an evil ghost. I'll give my Xiaoyi back." My third aunt was crying and making a fuss. My third master wanted to hit my third aunt, but I was stopped by my grandfather. My grandfather said, "Xiaoyi is lost, and it is normal for her to be an impatient mother." After my grandfather said this, he looked at my grandmother again. He said, "Mom, Shanzi's wife doesn't believe you, just peel the egg again and don't let her make trouble." My breast said, "That's right, Mom, just peel it again." My grandma looked at my third master with a squint eyes. My third master's eyes turned back and forth twice. He said angrily, "Xiaoyi is my granddaughter. If she loses her, I'm more anxious than anyone else, but you can't do it because of this. If you are anxious, just keep the matter on your mother. This is not a matter of peeling an egg. It is because you don't believe in your mother and treat her as an evil ghost." As soon as my third master finished speaking, my two mist's eyes turned red. She cried and said, "I want to be an evil ghost. If I become an evil ghost, you can beat me to death and you will never be upset anymore. It's just a burden." My grandma was crying in the yard, crying sadly. Everyone in the yard looked at each other, and a young wife advised my third aunt, "Shanzi wife, you must have thought too much. Let's go to the village to look for it. Maybe Xiaoyi is still in the village." My third aunt cried and said, "Xiaoyi is obedient and can't run around. She must have been killed by her." My third aunt pointed at my toothed breast with her finger with anger in her eyes. My third aunt said, if you don't peel the egg off today, it's not over. My third master shouted to my third aunt, what do you want to do? If you dare to make trouble, get out of my house and don't want you as your wife. My grandfather said, 3, what are you doing? It's so ugly. My third master said, how bad is my words? A grandson-in-law dares to rebel against the gods and bully my mother. She is really spoiled. My third aunt had red eyes. She pointed at my third master and scolded, Shui is your biological granddaughter. You don't care at all. Are you still human? As soon as my third aunt finished speaking, my third master wanted to beat my third aunt again. My two-breasted frowned and she said, okay. Stop making noise, bring me the egg. My third master widened his eyes and said, Mom, are you crazy? My third aunt hurriedly handed the egg to my grandma. Everyone in the yard surrounded me and stared at my grandma. My two mistress easily peeled the egg. She put the peeled egg into my third aunt's hand and then said, Shanz's wife, do you believe it this time? My third aunt was stunned for a few seconds and tears couldn't stop falling. My two miss said, I am old and don't want to celebrate my 100th birthday. You guys are leaving. Just let a few dolls accompany me. There are too many people, so I think it's too noisy. When my two breasts said this, the light of my eyes was staring at us children. My eyes made me feel scared. My third master said, Mom, since you think it's a mess, then we will go back to our own houses and not disturb you, and let a few dolls accompany you. My two-breasted nodded and she said, let's go. My third aunt cried and said, where did Shui go? Everyone in the yard comforted my third aunt and asked my third aunt to go home first. Maybe Shui has already gone home. My third aunt walked out of the yard with red eyes. Everyone in the yard left, only the few people in our family, as well as Yuanbao and Shuiying. My two mist smiled and said, you 3, sleep with me tonight. My breasts frowned and she said, Mom, Yuanfu should live in the east room. The Kang in the west room is too small. Anyway, you are in my house for retirement. You can see Yuanfu every day. Let Yuanbao first and Shuiying accompany you. Stay for a few days. The smile on my two-breasted face was stiff. She hesitated for a few seconds before she spoke, it's okay. After my two girls said this, she took Yuanbao and Shuiying into the west room. My breasts led me into the east room. My grandfather was sitting on the earthen Kang in the east room smoking a dry tobacco. He didn't know what he was thinking, his eyes were empty. My breast said, old man, what are you thinking? My grandfather sighed and said, why did Shui lose? Where did this child go? My breast said, it's probably because the evil ghosts have eaten it. As soon as my breasts finished speaking, my grandfather changed his face. He said, what are you saying? My mother peeled off the eggs in front of you. Why do you still doubt my mother? My breasts frowned and she said, Shui is obedient and a sensible child. She can't run around. She told me that she is in her mother's house. If you don't believe it, we'll go till the window tonight, see if my mother is an evil ghost. My master sighed and said helplessly, you are always so suspicious. Even if your mother is not an evil ghost, you will be called an evil ghost. My breasts curled her lips, and she said, there is a bloody smell on my mother, which is very strong. I just went to the warehouse to take a look and the basin of pig-killing blood was gone. I also asked Shuiying, and Shuiying said that there was only mother. After entering the warehouse, this pot of pig-killing blood is probably for my mother to drink it. My grandfather glared at my tits and said, no, nonsense. I'll go to the warehouse to take a look. My grandfather was about to get off the earthen Kang, but my breasts were held back. My breast said, I doubt this, too. Don't alert the enemy. When it's late at night, we'll lie on the window. If my mother is an evil ghost, she will definitely attack Yuanbao and Shuiying. Let's go and have a look at it in the evening. As soon as my breasts finished speaking, I saw a shadow passing by under the window. I looked carefully again, and there was nothing. Could it be that I just read it wrong? Just when I was confused, my breast said again, the evil ghosts eat people and drink blood. Old Jiao's fate is probably the fate of my mother. If I ask me, let's go and invite Taoist priests in advance. My grandfather frowned and said, Yuanbao and Xiuying are all her mother's blood, so something can't happen. My breasts curled their lips, too lazy to argue with my grandfather. It was late at night, my grandfather carefully opened the door, and he and my tits went to lie on the window. I wanted to go too, but my grandfather didn't let me, so I had to lie on the window and look out. Soon, my grandparents came back. My grandfather was very happy, with a smile on his face. He said, "Did you see it? Mom, Yuanbao, Xiuying are both sleeping. How could there be the evil ghost you mentioned?" My breasts frowned and she said, "No, is it because I'm thinking too much?" My grandfather said, "You just think too much." The next morning, Yuanbao and Xiuying came out of the west room, and the two of them were jumping around. Nothing happened. My grandfather said, "Mom, Xiuying hasn't found it yet. Yuanfu and I will go out to look for her breasts. If there is food in the pot, you can eat it first." My grandma said, "Okay, slow down on the road." My breasts came to me and she whispered, "Yuanfu, stay away from your breasts, don't listen to your breasts in everything." I nodded, I understand. After my milk told me, he followed my grandfather out. A few of us kids were playing in the yard. My toothy breasts were sitting under the wall basking in the sun. Her eyes were staring at us from time to time. Su Young said, "I don't want to live in a 2 million house." I said, "What's wrong?" Xiuying said, "There is a mouse in the house that bit my fingers through." Su Young raised her left hand and her little finger was really bitten. Yuanbao said, "I don't want to live in a two-mist house either." Xiuying asked, "You were bitten by a mouse, too?" Yuanbao shook his head and said, "I heard the two-mist talk in my sleep. She said she wanted to eat me. I was a little scared and wanted to go home." Su Young said, "I want to go home, too." As soon as Xiuying finished speaking, I saw my toothy breast stand up from the stool. She said, "Yuanfu, boil some hot water, I'll give you some chickens to eat." All of us were stunned and our eyes widened. There are only 3 chickens in my yard, all of which are kept for laying eggs. I said, "To milk, can the chicken laying eggs be killed?" The last time I ate chicken was during the Chinese New Year, and I haven't eaten chicken for a long time. My two-miss said, "Yes, catch the chicken quickly." I was a little hesitant and stood still. My two-girl said, "Su Young, grab the chicken." Xiuying glanced at me and she asked in a low voice, "Can you catch me?" My two-miss saw Xiuying not moving, and she was so angry that she stomped her feet. My two-miss went straight into the chicken coop and caught a hen. My toothy breasts entered the warehouse again and cut off the hen's head with one knife. My grandma said, "Yuanfu, boil hot water." The hen was dead, so I had to run to the warehouse to burn hot water. My two-mistress brought the dead chicken into the warehouse. She said, "There are not enough branches at home. You and Xiuying go to the mountain to pick up the branches." I nodded, "Okay." Xiuying and I went to the mountain to pick up branches. After picking up branches, we went home. But as soon as I entered the yard, my two-mistress widened her eyes and she said, "Yinbao, why didn't she come back with you?" I was stunned for a few seconds and said, "Yuanbao is at home, only Xiuying and I went to the mountain to pick up branches." My two-miss shook her head desperately, and she said, "No, isn't it right? Yuanbao is leaving with you." Xiuying said, "No, Yuanbao didn't follow us." My grandma said, "I have been in the warehouse and I haven't seen Yuanbao at all. Yuanbao must have gone up the mountain with you. Go to the mountain to look for it." I said, "Impossible. Although Yuanbao is small, he is very smart. If he follows us, he will definitely call us. Yuanbao will definitely not go up the mountain." As soon as I finished speaking, my two-breast changed her face. She said with a gloomy face, "If Yuanbao didn't go up the mountain, where did he go? I saw Yuanbao was lost by you. If you don't want Yuanbao to eat chicken, just put it the ingot is lost, right? Xiaoying said, no, we didn't see the ingot. My breasts were so masturbating that she said, that Yuanbao guy? You too lost Yuanbao. When the adults come back, it depends on what you do. Why don't you go find Yuanbao quickly? After my two girls said this, she entered the warehouse. The hen, who was killed by her, had not yet pulled out her hair and was lying on the ground with blood. Xiaoying cried and said, Yuanfu, what should I do? Yuanbao is lost. I said, Yuanbao was not lost by us. Yuanbao is smart. If he follows us, he will definitely call us. As soon as I finished speaking, I heard a faint cry coming from the west room. I heard not only the crying, but Xiaoying also heard it. Xiaoying said, it's an ingot. Xiaoying and I hurried into the west room and shouted in the west room, Yinbao. I heard a faint cry again. The sound seemed to come from the cabinet. The cabinet was very big and was my dowry. I leaned over to the cabinet, put my ear on it, and heard a faint crying sound inside. It was Yuanbao. I said, the ingot is in the cabinet. Xiaoying and I worked a lot to open a gap in the cabinet. The moment the cabinet opened, I smelled a strong smell of blood. I moved the cabinet a little further and said to it, Yuanbao. Yuanbao cried a little louder. Xiaoying and I tried our best to open the cabinet. The scene inside the cabinet scared Xiaoying and I. We both sat on the earth and Kang, unable to even shout. My hands and feet are weak and my body is sweating. Yuanbao was lying in the cabinet, his ears disappeared, and his 10 fingers disappeared. I also saw Xiaoying's clothes in the cabinet, and Xiaoying's clothes were covered with blood. Xiaoying's hands were trembling, and she whispered, it's an evil ghost. I took a deep breath and pulled Yuanbao out of the cabinet. Yuanbao's body was covered with blood and was very weak. His body was full of bites, which was shocking. I said, Yinbao, what's going on? As soon as I finished speaking, Yuanbao widened his eyes. I followed Yuanbao's gaze and saw my toothed breast standing at the door. I didn't know when she appeared. Did she hear what we said? I had too little expression on my face, and she said, what's wrong with Yuanbao? Why are there blood on my body? When my toothy breast said this, I saw that her teeth became much longer, sharp and thin. As soon as my two girls finished speaking, Xiaoying jumped out of the window. She ran and shouted, evil ghost, people eating evil ghost, come here. My two breasts seemed to have not heard Xiaoying say. She walked up to me slowly and said with a smile, Yuanfu is obedient, and put the Yuanbao in the cabinet. My toothed breast smelled like a pig that was plague dead, and it smelled bad. Yuanbao fainted, and I held Yuanbao tightly and refused to let go. Seeing that I didn't let go, my breasts were too anxious. She widened her eyes and showed a ferocious expression. She grabbed Yuanbao's arm with one hand, snatched Yuanbao from my arms, and grabbed Yuanbao from my arms with the other hand, and grabbed me by the other hand. Lifted up. Just when I felt that I was bound to die, I heard my grandfather's voice coming from the yard, Mom, we are back. My grandma heard my grandfather's voice and she giggled. My grandfather walked to the window and looked into the room, and he was stunned. My two-breasted hair is completely white, and her eyes are scarlet, making her look like a female ghost. Seeing that my toothy breasts were about to strangle me to death, my grandfather rushed into the room. He hugged my breasts from behind and shouted to me, Yuanfu, run! Go find your breasts quickly, go find Taoist Chen. My toothy breasts suddenly let go of my hand. When I got the chance, I jumped out of the window. I ran and shouted, help, help. My two-mist has become an evil ghost. I ran to the entrance of the village and saw my breasts. My breast said, Yuanfu, what's wrong? I cried and said, my toothy lady has become an evil ghost. My grandfather asked you to find Taoist Chen. My breasts instantly widened their eyes. She picked me up and ran towards the west end of the village. I don't know how long it took to run to Taoist Chen's house. Taoist Chen sat on the stool basking in the sun, and my breast said anxiously, Taoist Chen, something big happened, my old lady has become an evil ghost. Taoist Chen frowned and said, how many people are there in your yard? My breasts looked at me and I said, there are only my grandfather and my grandmother in the yard. After hearing what I said, Taoist Chen's eyebrows stretched out and he said, fortunately there are only 2 people. If there are too many people, it will be difficult to deal with. This evil ghost will possess you, leave quickly. Several of us hurried back to my house. As soon as we entered the yard, my mother was stunned. There were several people standing in my yard, including my second master, my third master, my second master's son Daquan, and my daughter-in-law Lotus. My breasts frowned and asked in a low voice, Master Chen, what should I do? Taoist Chen narrowed his eyes and said nothing. My toothed breasts were tied up and pressed to the ground, and blood was everywhere on the corners of her mouth. My third master said, Master Chen, please think of a solution quickly. What should I do? My mother has become an evil ghost. Taoist Chen said, please lock the old lady in the warehouse first, and you guys go to the back mountain to cut some peach branches back. My third master asked, what do you want to do with peach branches? Taoist Chen said, driving ghosts, go quickly. My grandfather said, Master Chen, do I still need it? My leg was bitten by my mother and it hurt so much. My grandfather's calves are bleeding and he looks very embarrassed. Taoist Chen said, don't go first, stay, I have something to ask you. My grandfather nodded, okay. My third master's eyes turned back and forth twice, and he and the others went to the mountain to get peach branches. After they left, only a few of us were left in the yard. Taoist Chen asked, after your mother became an evil ghost, did she only bit your leg? My grandfather frowned and said, I still bit my arm, but I avoided it. Taoist Chen asked again, why are there suddenly many people in the family? Who called him? My grandfather said, it was the one who Su Young called me, she called my brothers and the others. Taoist Chen asked, which one is showing? My grandfather said, Su Young didn't come. Su Young is a girl from Daquan's family, she is only 7 years old. Taoist Chen frowned and said nothing. My breasts asked, Master Chen, what's wrong? Taoist Chen looked at my grandfather and said, take your mother out of the warehouse. My grandfather nodded, he entered the warehouse. While my grandfather had entered the warehouse, Taoist Chen took out 2 lucky bags from his pocket. He stuffed the lucky bag into my breast's hands and whispered, put on the lucky bag, in this way, the evil ghost cannot possess it. Remember, no one in this courtyard can believe it. It is likely that it is an evil ghost. I have to lead the evil ghost out. My breasts frowned and she asked in a low voice, how to induce them? Taoist Chen whispered, the evil ghost eats people, it can't help but use people to attract them. I think your mother is not like an evil ghost, so I will use your mother to attract them tonight. My grandfather got my two-mist out of the warehouse. My two-mist was slumped on the ground, looking dull, as if I was greatly stimulated. Taoist Chen narrowed his eyes, and suddenly, the cry of a child came from the west room. Yuanbao was still alive. My breasts hurriedly carried Yuanbao out of the west room, and Yuanbao shrank into my breasts' arms, staring at Taoist Chen with his eyes fixed on him. My breasts came to Taoist Chen and asked in a low voice, Taoist Chen, do you still have a lucky bag? Taoist Chen shook his head and said, the lucky bag is rare, it is a treasure, there is nothing extra. My breasts frowned and she said, poor Yuanbao. As soon as my breasts finished speaking, my third master and the others came back, holding many peach blossom branches in their hands. Taoist Chen weaves a large bamboo basket with peach blossom branches and puts my tooth milk into the bamboo basket. Taoist Chen said, hang the evil ghost on the locust tree and hang it for 3 days and 3 nights. This evil ghost will die. As soon as Taoist Chen finished speaking, a few people joined forces to hang my tooth milk on a tree 5 or 6 meters high. My toothy breasts were sitting in the bamboo basket and crying loudly. She wanted to speak, but she couldn't make any sound. My third master asked, Master Chen, is this method okay? Taoist Chen said, don't worry, the evil ghost will die in 3 days. After saying this, Taoist Chen said to my milk, cook a few eggs and let everyone peel the eggs. My breasts nodded and went to the warehouse to cook. Wait until evening, my milk served the eggs on the table. The people in the room were stunned when they saw the eggs, but they didn't say anything. The evil ghosts could not see the eggs, and only people could see them. My milk was given an egg to everyone, and she smiled and said, "Eat while it's hot." When my breast said this, my eyes kept staring at the few people on the dining table. Everyone picked up the eggs and peeled them open them, but Yuanbao didn't take the eggs, and his fingers were gone. My milk frowned, and she put the peeled eggs into the ingot bowl. Ingredients: eat them while they are hot. Yuanbao was stunned for a few seconds, and he said, "What should I eat?" As soon as Yuanbao finished speaking, everyone at the dinner table looked at each other. My breast said, "Eat what you have in your bowl." Yuanbao looked complicated when he saw my breasts, and he smiled and said, "I don't want to eat eggs." When Yuanbao said this, he looked down at the bowl in front of him, but his bowl was obviously empty. Just now, my milk had already taken away the eggs from his bowl. My breasts looked up at Taoist Chen, and Taoist Chen signaled my breasts not to speak. My milk laughed dryly and said, "If you don't want to eat, don't eat it." Yuanbao looked at the people on the dining table coldly, and he said coldly, "What do you all think I'm doing? Don't you think I'm an evil ghost, do you?" My grandfather said, "No, the evil ghost has been caught." Yuanbao snorted coldly, his eyes slowly moving, revealing strangeness. Yuanbao said, "I'm going to go to the west room to sleep." After Yuanbao said this, he got off the earthen kang. He ran into the west room and closed the door of the west room. Taoist Chen narrowed his eyes and said, "The evil ghost is in Yuanbao's body, and he will catch the ghost tonight." Everyone at the dinner table widened their eyes. My third master asked, "The evil ghost is inside Yuanbao's body, so let my mother down quickly. It's windy on the tree." Taoist Chen said, "You can't let go. By midnight tonight, the evil ghost will definitely not be able to help but eat people. It will definitely appear under the big tree. He will tilt his head upwards. At that time, you will go around behind the evil ghost, tie the evil ghost with a rope, and I will use the talisman paper to kill the evil ghost." Everyone at the dinner table nodded and agreed. Taoist Chen said, "Everything is spread out, don't let the evil ghosts become suspicious." The people at the dining table scattered and went back to their own houses. Taoist Chen said, "I'll go back first and get the talisman paper. I'll definitely come back before midnight." After saying this, Taoist Chen left, and there were only 3 of us left in the room. My grandfather sat on the earthen kang and sighed, and he said, "What's this called?" My breast said, "There's no way, I've met it." As soon as my breasts finished speaking, my grandfather said, "Since the evil ghost is an ingot, you should put your mother down. The wind on the tree is so strong that you can't freeze your mother out of illness." My breasts frowned and she said, "Old man, listen to Taoist Chen, let my mother bear it first and deceive the evil ghost." My grandfather said, "I'll send a quilt to my mother." After my grandfather said this, he picked up the quilt and was about to go out. My mother hurriedly stopped my grandfather, and she said, "Don't go out." As soon as my breasts finished speaking, I saw my third master taking the quilt to the yard, and he threw the quilt to my 2 million. My breast said, "The third brother is here, don't go." My grandfather frowned and didn't go out. I lay on the windowsill and looked out. I seemed to see a black shadow following my third master, and the black shadow followed into the room where my third master lived. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. My third master and the black shadow disappeared. At midnight, Taoist Chen had not come back yet, and my breast frowned and said, "Why haven't Taoist Chen come back yet? You won't encounter any threats, right?" As soon as my breasts finished speaking, I heard my third master screaming. He shouted, "Help, the evil ghost is going to eat people." I lay on the window and looked outside, and saw my third master running out of the house in a hurry, with blood stained on his face. My third master knocked on my door hard. "Open the door quickly." My mother and I looked at each other and exchanged their eyes. My breasts asked, 3, What does that evil ghost look like? My third master said, it's Yuanbao. Yuanbao is an evil ghost. He ate all the people in the house. My grandfather frowned and said, I have seen that evil ghost with my own eyes. It is clearly a shadow. Whoever it possesses is the evil ghost, and the third brother is lying. After my grandfather said this, he shouted to the outside of the door, San Lao, run quickly, the door in the room cannot be opened. My breasts whispered, is the third brother an evil spirit? My grandfather nodded and said, the third brother wants to enter the house and eat us all. As soon as my grandfather finished speaking, the sound of my third grandfather smashing the door came from outside the door. The sound of smashing the door was very loud. My third master also became louder and he shouted, open the door. Open the door. If I don't open the door, I'll eat you all. My wooden door was smashed and the frame sounded, and my breast said anxiously, old man, what should I do? He is about to come in. My grandfather frowned and said, climb onto the beam of the house quickly and climb out of the roof, the evil ghost will not come up. A few of us stepped on the stool and it took a lot of effort to climb to the beam of the house. My grandfather poked a hole in the roof of the room again, and several people crawled out along the hole. My grandfather was the last one to climb up. As soon as my grandfather climbed up, my wooden door was kicked open. My third grandfather entered the house viciously. He saw that there was no one in the house and the hole on the roof. He hurriedly ran to the house. In the courtyard, he shouted at us, down from me. If you don't get down, I will climb up to the room and eat you all. My grandfather frowned, and he said, if you have the ability, you can climb up. If you don't have a ladder, I'll see how you climb up. As soon as my grandfather finished speaking, my grandfather glared at me and she said, you are reminding him. My grandfather told my tits not to speak. My third master showed a strange smile, and he ran to the warehouse and moved a ladder out of the warehouse. My third master put the ladder on the house and he swallowed. My grandfather said, don't come over. My third master used his hands and feet to climb to the roof. He was about to reach the top. My master pushed the ladder away. My third master fell to the ground hard. My third master seemed to feel the pain. He put it again. The ladder was placed on the house and continued to climb up. When I was about to climb to the roof, my grandfather pushed the ladder away again. After repeated several times, my third grandfather lay on the ground and no movement was heard. My breast said, old man, did the evil ghost die from falling? My grandfather frowned and said, let's watch it again at dawn. The next morning, a few of us got off the house and put my tooth milk down from the tree. My third master was already dead and fell to death. The ingot in the west room was also dead, leaving only a pool of blood. There is also my second master's family, and only bloody clothes were left, which were eaten by the evil ghosts. My grandfather said, let's go, we have to leave quickly. As soon as my grandfather finished speaking, I saw the gate of my yard open and Taoist Chen entered the yard. My breast said, Master Chen, why did you come? Taoist Chen narrowed his eyes and said, I was trapped by an evil ghost last night. I really couldn't get out of it. That evil ghost? My breast said, the evil ghost is dead. Taoist Chen laughed out loud, and he said, it's okay to die. My breast said, Master Chen, our family is going to move out. I will give you what you gave me yesterday. Taoist Chen was stunned for a few seconds, and he said, what did I give you? What? My breast said, blessed bag. Taoist Chen smiled and said, you don't need to return a broken lucky bag. As soon as Taoist Chen finished speaking, my breasts changed their face. Taoist Chen smiled and stared at us. His eyes became more and more strange. I muttered in my pacifier, I can't leave anymore. Taoist Chen's smile kept echoing in my ears.